Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tariq. And welcome to our special segment, Tariq Classes for Class 12th History. And the chapter for today is Kings and Chronicles, the Mughal Courts, circa 16th to 17th centuries. In the previous chapter, we got to know about we got to know about the land revenues under the Mughals. We got to know about how the panchayat system worked, how the village community worked, how zamindari worked, how the administration of the Mughal Empire worked. But इस chapter में हम लोग ये जानेंगे कि जो kings थे, especially Mughal kings थे, they had the habit of maintaining their maintaining a sort of court history book. At times, the Mughal emperors, they wrote their own history, own autobiography, like how Babur wrote his own autobiography. Then हुमायूं की biography उनकी बहन ने लिखी थी, गुलबदन बानो बेगम ने. So they all had this habit of maintaining their own journals, and they also commissioned court historians कि वो भी उनकी journey, उनका पूरा from the birth to till the time, वो present time जो था वो पूरा वो chronically वो jot down करें chronologically, and उसको फिर हम जो न्यू आजकल के जो मॉडर्न हिस्टोरियंस हैं उनको क्रॉनिकल्स बोलना शुरू कर दिया था. इन्हीं किताबों की वजह से वी गेट टू नो अबाउट हाउ द कोर्ट फंक्शनड, मुगल कोर्ट फंक्शनड, वहाँ पे एटिकेट्स कैसे होते थे, एड्रेस कैसे किया जाता था किसी इशू को. एंड इन क्रॉनिकल्स की वजह से वी ऑल्सो गेट टू नो अबाउट द हैरम, अबाउट हाउ द हैरम फंक्शन, हाउ एंड टाइटल्स उन्होंने क्या क्या लिए थे, एंड मतलब बेसिकली आपको उनकी लाइफ के बारे में थोड़ा पता चलता है. The first topic is the Mughals and their empire. So the name Mughals is derived from the term Mongol. We had Mongols in the Central Asia from the place Mongol. सबसे famous चेंगिस खान थे. तो उसी मंगोल से जो टर्मिनोलॉजी है मुग़ल आता है. बाबर सबसे पहले मुग़ल एम्परर थे. He traced his descent from his father side to Timurid, जो तिमुर थे, बहुत फेमस. तिमुर द लेम, मतलब बहुत सारे टर्मिनोलॉजीज़ हैं इनको यूज़ की गई हैं इनको डिस्क्राइब करने में. एंड ही ऑल्सो केम टू इंडिया इन द 1300s. एंड फ्रॉम हिज मदर साइड उनकी जो डिसेंडेंसी है वो चंगेज़ खान की तरफ जाती है. तो मदर की साइड से वो मंगोल थे और फादर की साइड से वो तिमुरिद के साइड से थे. एंड ही स्पोक टर्किश एंड he actually looked down a bit upon the Mongol hordes. He was very critical about the Mongol hordes. मतलब उनको वो ज़्यादा पसंद नहीं थे. But the Mughal rulers never referred themselves as Mughals but Timurids or Chagatai Turks or at times Gurkarnis also. मुग़ल जो टर्मिनोलॉजी है वो अंग्रेज़ों ने कॉइन किया था. अंग्रेज़ों ने ये टर्म दिया था मुग़ल्स. और अब देखा जाए तो आज की डेट में मुग़ल जो टर्मिनोलॉजी है वो बहुत ज़्यादा फेमस है. पीपल जनरली रेफर देम टू एज मुग़ल्स एंड दे थिंक उस टाइम पे भी ये लोग मुग़ल ही बोलते होंगे अपने आप को. ऑल्सो द टर्म मोगली जो रुडयार्ड किपलिंग की बुक जंगल बुक है वो भी मुग़ल वर्ड से ली गई है. जो मुग़ल एम्पायर है दैट हैड न्यूमरस स्टेट्स एंड प्रिंसिपैलिटीज अंडर देम थ्रू पॉलिटिकल अलायंसेस और वॉर्स और कॉन्क्वेस्ट विद द लोकल चीफ्टन्स. जो सबसे पहले मुग़ल किंग थे वो थे ज़हीरुद्दीन बाबर. बाबर ही बिलोंग टू उज़्बेकिस्तान. ही इज़ प्लेस ऑफ बर्थ इज़ फरगना बट ही वॉज ड्रिवन आउट फ्रॉम दैट प्लेस बाय द उज़्बेक्स. फिर उन्होंने काबुल में आके अपनी किंगडम इस्टेब्लिश की. एंड 1526 में ही केम टू इंडिया एंड ही बिकेम द मुग़ल रूलर ऑफ इंडिया. He was also invited by the nobles of the Lodi dynasty. जो इंडिया के अंदर लोधी डायनेस्टी का रूल था और जो उस टाइम के रूलर थे इब्राहिम लोदी, उनसे ना खुश होकर उनके जो नोबल्स थे उन्होंने बाबर को इनविटेशन भेजा था टू कम एंड अटैक इब्राहिम लोदी. So he was also invited. He was reluctant because he did not like the weather conditions of the subcontinent. It was too dry and too hot for him. But eventually he ruled India after defeating Ibrahim Lodi. His successor Humayun, he further, increased the horizon of the empire, but he ultimately lost to Shesha Suri. शेषा सूरी सुर डायनेस्टी के किंग थे. तो इनिशियली तो जो हुमायूं थे 1530 से 40 तक ही रूल्ड. देन ही लॉस्ट हिज एम्पायर टू शेषा सूरी, एंड उसके बाद फॉर 15 years ही टुक रिफ्यूज इन ईरान. शाह ऑफ पर्शिया जो थे, ही हैड केप्ट हिम देयर फॉर सम टाइम, एंड देन अगेन ही केम बैक टू इंडिया एंड got his empire back from the rule of the Sur dynasty. Then in 1556 he also died. He could only rule for a year. उसके बाद जो हम कहते हैं कि जो मुग़ल एम्पायर बना, कि हाउ अ किंगडम शुड फंक्शन, वो चीज़ जो हुई वो अकबर के थ्रोन पे आने से हुई. As compared to Akbar's father and grandfather, Akbar was able to consolidate the empire, and he was a strong and an able ruler. And जो frontiers थे उसको भी extend किया empire के हिंदू कुश माउंटेन्स तक. और जो अकबर थे वो he knew how to play politics, and he knew कि how to, you are not just ruling over people of your own community, you're ruling over the people जो different religion को belong करते हैं, different cultures को belong करते हैं. He also made it sure that the Uzbeks were also, they don't enter the Indian subcontinent. So he had made it sure कि वो भी आके disturb ना करें. Akbar also had fairly successful and able successors. We have Jahangir, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb, and they also consolidated the empire and governed the empire the way they were supposed to. 16th-17th century के अंदर institutions की establishment भी हुई, taxation शुरू हो गई, administration भी establish होना शुरू हो गया. Then they started having proper political structure, and that depended on the military. Then they had proper hierarchical based offices given to the nobles and nobility. मतलब nobility की establishment हुई कि court में कौन रहेगा. Court became the center of power in that point of time. You had the main capital, then you also had various core areas and periphery areas of the Mughal Empire. Political alliances established हुए, relationships बनाए गए थे with other chieftains so that they could rule better, they could rule in a better manner. Obviously, when you are ruling in a place where people are of mixed culture, they are of mixed religion and communities, तो alliances बनाने से ही आप अपना रूल और बढ़ा सकते हैं. बट 1707 के बाद, औरंगज़ेब की डेथ के बाद मुग़ल एम्पायर थोड़ा डिमिनिश होने लग गया था, डिक्लाइन होने लग गया था. समवेयर लैंड agrarian crisis की वजह से, या they were not able rulers after औरंगज़ेब. एंड इसकी वजह से क्या हुआ कि रीजनल किंगडम, रीजनल प्रिंसिपैलिटीज़ इमर्ज होने लग गई. लाइक यू हैव लखनऊ, नवाब ऑफ लखनऊ, बंगाल, निज़ाम्स ऑफ हैदराबाद, and other regional powers they started to emerge. But जो मुग़ल एम्पायर जो सिर्फ दिल्ली तक रह गया था, वो एक नॉमिनल हेड बन गया था. जो लास्ट मुग़ल एम्पर थे बहादुर शाह ज़फ़र, उनका 2 रुतबा, मतलब पावर ऐसे नहीं थी डोमिनेंस, बट हाँ एक नॉमिनल और टिटुलर वे से वो he was really revered by the other principalities. But in 1857 the empire was completely destroyed by the British.
The next topic is the production of chronicles. Now, the production of chronicles was an important undertaking of the empire, and they were done specifically to tell the people that they were governing about the empire, to also tell the people who were not under its fold, who were maybe outside of it and who were trying to rebel, that if you try to act smart, or if you try to face up to the imperial power, you would not be able to withstand because of the glory of this empire. And also it was meant to save the history of the empire, or of the rule of a particular emperor, for posterity, for future generations to use. Now, unfortunately, in a way, for the sake of learning about history, as is the case with most court documents or court histories, these are histories from the bird's eye view. So it's an history of the emperor, his family, the administration, the court, war, and the policies that are enacted by the emperor. And you don't get to really hear of the grassroots as such, but then you maybe get to hear about them in the sense of an intention. So the emperor intended to carry out such reforms for the benefit of the people, or so on and so forth. And even the way that the chronicles are named, जैसे अकबरनामा हो गया या फिर शाहजहांनामा हो गया या फिर आलमगीरनामा हो गया, they hint that the history of the empire is synonymous with that of the history of the emperor. So Akbarnama would talk about the life and times of Akbar. Shahjahan, the same for Shahjahanama and Alamgirnama, which was the name for Aurangzeb. Now the language of the court, जैसे अगर हम अभी current government में देखें तो ठेठ Hindi is the language of the court along with English, and it changes regionally. So during that time, during the Mughal time, the language of the court was Persian, and all official documents were carried out in this language. Even for other literary writings which were maybe not directly connected to the court, Persian was used along with other North Indian languages like Hindavi and other regional variants. अब जो Mughal थे, they were Chagatai Turks by origin, so Turkish was their mother tongue, and even Babur wrote his memoirs and poems in Turkish. तो Persian कहाँ से आया? This was done consciously by Akbar during his reign. Now, why did Akbar choose to make Persian the court language? During his time, there was a lot of inflow of migrants from Persia and other Central Asian countries who would come to the Mughal Empire in search of a position in the Mughal court, and it is possible that this facilitated the making of Persian into the court language. Speaking in Persian meant that it brought you power and prestige.
Yeah.
Now the emperor spoke in Persian, the royal household spoke in Persian, nobles were speaking in Persian, so it became the language of the administration as well. And not just this, but even clerks and other administrative officials would also have to learn Persian, because then the documents were also done in Persian. जहाँ पे Persian directly use नहीं किया जाता था, even then it trickled down to the vocabulary of the regional or the local people. So Persian found its way to languages like Rajasthani, Marathi, even Tamil. And जैसे English has been Indianized, and the same way Persian was also Indianized, and it developed.
It basically took the regional languages का जो होता है ना, उसके साथ जो mix होता है तो कैसा होता है.
And through this process, a new language sort of emerged when Persian and Hindavi collaborated, or they were mixed, and Urdu was born.
Yeah, Urdu was also not just born like this. Urdu was also born in the army camps of the Mughal Empire. Soldiers coming from various places, from different parts of the subcontinent, getting their languages, उनके कुछ words, पर्शियन के साथ मिलके हिंदवी सब मिक्सचर जो एक था, उसको हम उर्दू कहते हैं.
So Persian was a very important language, and it was the language of the courts, and even official court histories were written in Persian. बाबरनामा पर्शियन में नहीं लिखी गई थी, वो टर्किश में लिखी गई थी, but it was translated to Persian. Akbarnama was written in Persian, and Akbar even commissioned Sanskrit works like Ramayana and Mahabharata to be translated to Persian along with the Mughal miniatures. And the Mahabharata was called the Razamnama, which was the book of wars. Now the Mughal times were before the advent of the printing press, which means that all imperial chronicles were in the form of manuscripts, जिसका मतलब है कि all these chronicles were written by hand. Now the center of production for these chronicles or manuscripts was the imperial Kitabkhana. Now when you translate the word Kitabkhana, you would imagine it to mean the library, although in reality it was something akin to a scriptorium. So this was the place where the emperor's manuscripts were kept, new manuscripts were produced, and older manuscripts were preserved. Now the creation of these manuscripts was a task in itself, and it involved a variety of people, right from people to make the paper, then somebody to write, like scribes to write the history, calligraphers to write decorative script, then artisans to paint the miniature to describe the scene of the text, even gliders who would illuminate the page, then bookbinders to finally consolidate the folios of the manuscript into a decorative bind. A task that took so much of labor and was of such they produced beautiful folios, and the manuscripts were an art in itself, and it was considered a very valuable item to be commissioned, to be made, and it was something of an honor to have created this, to have commissioned it. So not only did it exemplify the patron or the emperor who commissioned it, even the people who were involved in making it, so specifically the calligraphers and the artisans, they also gained a lot of praise for their work, and they gained a lot of fame for their work. Unfortunately, people who were making the pages or who were binding them, वो इतने फेमस नहीं हो पाए. Their names are lost to time, but we know names of calligraphers and artisans and painters who have created this work of art. Now, calligraphy was also an art in itself, and it is something that we still, or at least I still, look for calligraphy videos on Instagram and YouTube. And that time also it was an art form that was most sought after. अकबर का जो favorite calligraphy script था वो नश्तलिक था, which was written in long horizontal strokes, and to create this reed kalam or pen was used, जिसका nib was between 5 millimeters to 10 millimeters, and it was dipped in carbon ink or syahi, and that was used to create the script.
The painted image. जो पेंटर्स थे दे प्लेड अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल जब भी एक मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट की जब क्रिएशन होती थी उस टाइम पे. जो स्क्राइबर्स भी होते थे जब वो क्रॉनिकल्स लिख रहे होते थे, देन दे वुड ऑलवेज लीव ब्लैंक स्पेसेस फॉर दीज पेंटर्स, फॉर दीज आर्टिस्ट टू मेक ड्राइंग और सीन और अ पर्टिकुलर सीन और स्केच ऑफ अ पर्टिकुलर रूलर. स्पेशली जब उस क्रॉनिकल के अंदर कोई सीन है जो वो लिख रहे हैं, स्क्राइबर्स लिख रहे हैं, कोई इंसिडेंट है, उस इंसिडेंट के बारे में अगर कोई पेंटिंग है जो क्रिएट कर सकते हैं, तो जो पेंटर्स है वो क्रिएट करते थे. ऑल्सो it was passed from people to look at it, and also it had a very powerful image, a powerful a meaning behind it. कभी कभी कोई इंसिडेंट आप जब पढ़ो तो आपको उसका इम्पैक्ट इतना स्ट्रॉन्ग नहीं लगता. जब आप उस इंसिडेंट की पिक्चर या पेंटिंग देखते हो तब आपको वो चीज़ और भी अच्छी लगती है. हिस्टोरियन अबुल फजल कहते हैं कि जो ये पेंटिंग्स होती थी, ये जो मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट होते थे, वो एक मैजिकल आर्ट होता था. मतलब इतनी खूबसूरत ये मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट होती थी कि लगता था जैसे दीज पेंटिंग्स दे पोजेस लाइफ, दे पोजेस लाइफ एंड इट लुक्स ब्यूटीफुल. अभी लगता है कि अभी ही जैसे चल के उस पेंटिंग से बाहर जो पेंटेड हैं चीज़ें निकल आएंगी. अब जैसे कोर्ट सीन्स पेंट काफ़ी होते थे, वे एम्परर इज़ देयर, हिज नोबल्स आर सराउंडिंग हिम. ये जो चीज़ है कभी ना कभी उस वक्त रूलर्स एंड रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स ऑफ द मुस्लिम ऑर्थोडॉक्सी, उलेमा, उनके बीच में टेंशन्स क्रिएट करती थी. Ulemas were not very happy with the manuscript, with these paintings done by the artists, because in the hadith and in the shara, paintings of living beings is not allowed, whether human being or any living creature is not allowed. It is against the shara. तो उनको ये लगता था कि ये आप इस्लाम के अगेंस्ट आ रहे हैं, एंड ये काम जो है जान डालना किसी लिविंग ऑब्जेक्ट में या लिविंग बीइंग में, वो सिर्फ ऊपर वाला ही कर सकता है, इंसान नहीं. बट ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम द शारा दे स्टार्टेड एक्सेप्टिंग दीज पेंटेड मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट्स, द पेंटिंग्स एंड मिनिएचर्स, दे eventually accepted. Akbar was very fond of paintings, manuscripts and miniatures. उनके अपने कारखाना था अकबर का, जहाँ पे artists from all walks of life, whether they were sons of palanquin bearer or they were sons of cobbler. ऐसा नहीं था कि सिर्फ एक बड़े ख़ानदान के ही लोग पेंटर्स बनते थे. हर एक कम्युनिटी से पेंटर्स आते थे. They would make miniatures there or paintings there of a particular scene. And अकबर कहते हैं कि वो हमेशा whenever he would be stressed, he would go to the कारखाना and that to de-stress himself. And portfolios थे इनके, अपने ateliers थे. अकबर से ही शुरुआत हुई थी पेंटिंग्स की. एंड अकबर और उलेमा के बीच में भी काफ़ी एक बार टेंशन क्रिएट हो गई थी इसी चीज़ को लेके. तो अकबर हमेशा कहते थे हम सिर्फ बना सकते हैं, तस्वीर बना सकते हैं, जान तो ऊपर वाले ही डालेंगे उस चीज़ के अंदर. तो उसमें इतना मतलब ही डिडंट लाइक too much of orthodoxy of the ulema. So he still continued with that, and even Jahangir had his own ateliers and he had his own portfolio. Shah Jahan had. औरंगज़ेब के टाइम पे कम हो गया था पेंटिंग, बट दीज पीपल दे ऑल enjoyed miniatures and manuscripts and paintings of a particular scene. Hunting scene used to be there. जहांगीर के टाइम पे we also see European influence coming in paintings के अंदर. You see paintings of baby Christ. You see paintings of Mother Mary and a halo also around their head. That is European influence in Mughal paintings. And paintings, miniature paintings or paintings in general was not just restricted to the Mughals. Even other Muslim empires, they also commissioned artists to make their portrait or to make a particular scene, to make people, to draw people. Especially the Safavid rulers, they were very fond of getting their portraits and being painted by the artist. Especially Behzad, एक बहुत famous artist है ईरान के, who with his good work, with his fine work, paintings, उन्होंने Safavid empire को काफ़ी मशहूर कर दिया था through his paintings. Artists from Iran, they made their way to the Mughal courts as well. Especially Mir Sayyid Ali and Abdul Samad, who came to India with Humayun when Humayun was there as seeking refuge in Iran. And a lot of other painters, artists, they came from other parts to gain patronage or to gain prestige in the Mughal courts. But tensions ज़रूर कभी ना कभी हो जाती थी ऑर्थोडॉक्स ग्रुप्स में, रूलर्स में. स्पेशली अबुल फजल बताते हैं कि अकबर ने ये बात कही थी. There are many that hate painting, but such men I dislike. It appears to me that an artist has a unique way of recognizing God when he must come to feel that he cannot bestow life on his work. Basically, artist का काम है एक खूबसूरत तस्वीर बनाने का, but उसमें जान तो सिर्फ अल्लाह ही डाल सकते हैं. So he tried to convince the ulema that stop being so orthodox, because its paintings are beautiful. It's a way of portraying. मतलब आप एक लाइव डाल रहे हो, उसमें आप पोर्ट्रे कर रहे हो, एक सीन पोर्ट्रे कर रहे हो, या इट्स ऑल्सो साइन ऑफ पावर एम्पायर का, कि कितना रुतबा था, या कैसी बिल्डिंग्स थी, कैसी स्ट्रक्चर्स थे, कोर्ट सीन्स कैसे होते थे. द अकबरनामा एंड बादशाहनामा. अकबरनामा जो कि अकबर की हिस्ट्री के ऊपर है, बादशाहनामा इज आई थिंक ऑन शाहजहाँ. ये दीज आर द टू वेल नोन इलस्ट्रेटेड chronicles. इसमें ऑलमोस्ट 150 पेजेस डबल साइडेड पेजेस सिर्फ आपको पेंटिंग्स दिखेंगी of war scenes and sieges and hunting scenes and construction scenes and etc. The author of Akbarnama was Abul Fazl. Abul Fazl had spent his time in Agra when he was a child, and he was really well versed in Greek, in Persian, Arabic and Sufism. He would always, be against the policies of the Orthodox ulema. He would speak against them. He was a very forceful debater and was not very fond of orthodoxy in general. And this attracted Akbar when he saw Abul Fazl, and he, made Abul Fazl his spokesperson, especially जब उनकी policies कुछ होती थी. And क्योंकि Akbar wanted the state to be out of the control of the religious orthodoxy. So Abul Fazl, he shaped and articulated various policies during Akbar's reign. Beginning in 1589, Abul Fazl started, writing Akbarnama, and it took 13 years because he kept on revising the chronicles. The drafts were made, and it all was based on actual documents, official documents, oral traditions. and especially of knowledgeable people, उसी की basis के ऊपर अकबरनामा लिखी गई थी. अकबरनामा was divided into 3 sections. The first 2 chronicles. The third part is Ain-e-Akbari. The first volume talks about the starting of mankind from Adam to the first celestial year of Akbar 30 years. एंड उसके बाद जो सेकंड थी वो 46 रेगनल ईयर में आके ख़त्म होती है till 1601. एंड बट नेक्स्ट ईयर in 1602 Abul Fazl he fell to the conspiracy that was hatched by Prince Salim, and he was killed by Prince Salim's friend Bir Singh Bundela. The Akbarnama was written in a way, it was more on a diachronic sense of giving political events, and also in a novel sense of synchronic way, where he's telling about society, geography, administration, or a particular incident without going in chronology. It was written in a very ornate language, in a very ornate way, because I think it was spoken in the court whenever कोई किस्सा कुछ बताना होता था. And ये जो Indo-Persian style of writing था, it influenced and it was patronized in the court, and many wanted to write the way Abul Fazl wrote. In the Ain-e-Akbari, Abul Fazl also talks about how composite and how heterogeneous the empire was. People, there were Hindus, there were Jains, there were Muslims, there were Buddhists, there were Sikhs. People from all cultures and traditions, they all lived and harmoniously in the empire. A pupil of Abul Fazl, उनका नाम था Abdul Hamid Lahori. He was the one who wrote Badshah-Nama, जो शाहजहां के ऊपर थी. Shahjahan got to know about his really good writing skills, so he commissioned him to write about his history. And जो Badshah-Nama थी वो 3 sections में, 3 दफ्तर्स में divided थी, and on the basis of 10 lunar years, like on the basis of lunar years, मतलब एक decade, फिर दूसरा decade, फिर तीसरा. First 2 years जो शाहजहां की रेन के थे वो उन्होंने लिखे थे अब्दुल हामिद लाहौरी ने, and that was revised by Sadullah Khan, who was शाहजहां's वज़ीर. But जब third decade की बारी आई, so अब्दुल हामिद लाहौरी he was not well and he died. तो फिर जो थर्ड डिकेड था शाहजहां की रेन का, वो वारिस ने लिखी थी. कॉलोनियल पीरियड के टाइम पे जो ब्रिटिश एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर्स थे, दे स्टार्टेड टू रीड वेरियस टेक्स्ट रिटन इन द मिडीवल टाइम टू अंडरस्टैंड the country, the subcontinent, to understand the people, culture, religion, how they function. Then in 1784, Asiatic Society of Bengal was founded by Sir William Jones, and काफ़ी editing, printing and translations of manuscripts started. Badshah-Nama और Akbarnama का भी यही historians started to translate the work. Early 20th century में Akbarnama was translated to English by Henry Beveridge, and it was a very, very difficult task. Only few aspects of Badshah-Nama has been translated. It still needs a proper translation.
The next topic is the ideal kingdom. Now, throughout the court histories, the chronicles have tried to draw in on the concept of the Mughal ruler being connected to God. And one such anecdote which was frequently narrated was that of the Mongol queen Alenqua, who was impregnated by a ray of light, and this offspring that she bore carried this divine light, and this light passed on from generation to generation, and then subsequently also to the Mughal Empire. Abul Fazl jo hai, he places Mughal kinship at the topmost in the hierarchy of things that receive divine light from God, जिसको फरेज़ादी भी बोलते हैं. ये जो concept है, it was inspired by an Iranian Sufi by the name of Shihabuddin Surawardi, who developed this concept where the king would receive the light from God, and then it was him that transferred this divine light to his subjects. So therefore the king became the source of spiritual guidance to his subjects. Now the paintings that accompanied these ideas, they were done in a way that inspired the viewer to also believe in this idea. And during the 16th and 17th centuries, artists were heavily inspired by European paintings and they added the concept of halos. Specifically, जब जैसे हमने अभी बात की जहांगीर के मुगल miniatures में, there was a halo around him to signify divine rulership, and this was directly picked up from European paintings, where this was used to highlight baby Jesus or Mother Mary. Mughal chronicles describe the empire as comprising of various groups, so whether it be Hindus and Jains and Zoroastrians and Muslims, and on top of them the emperor stood as a symbol of peace and stability and brotherhood, and it was under him that there was prosperity within the subjects. He ensured that there was justice for all, that there were no quarrels between different groups. Abul Fazl jo hai, he describes the concept of Sulekul or universal peace as the cornerstone of enlightened rule. According to Sulekul, the different groups or the different religious factions had the freedom to express their opinions and be different, as long as they did not interfere with each other, as long as they didn't quarrel with each other, as long as it still was a secular space.
Yeah, it's basically peace amongst the brothers.
Yeah.
Peace
Among brothers, and then your emperor was above all of that. So like your governance was above religion, and that was the cornerstone, according to Abul Fazl, for enlightened rule.
Because the emperor is the law, and nothing is above the law.
Exactly, which is something that should be a basic thing even today, where your religion should always, it's a personal thing, so it should be secondary to the state. Like religion and politics should not mingle.
Yeah, nothing should be above the law. Even the politicians are not above the law.
Now, the ideal of Sulekul was also implemented through state policies, and in the Mughal court as well, there was a homogeneous mix of nobles. So there were Persians, there were Iranis, there were Duranis, there were there were Rajputs, and then there were people from Deccan, and all of them rose to their power on the basis of merits. There was no favoritism.
Because Akbar की शुरुआत में जो nobility थी उसमें Turanis used to dominate. Turanis were the kingsmen of the Mughal kingsmen of Akbar, and then you had Iranis and you had Indian Muslims जो पहले के residing Muslims थे. बहुत कम थे जो Rajputs थे. But as soon as Akbar progressed in his life, the Rajputs dominated the scene, especially nobility की जब हम बात करते हैं, क्योंकि Akbar not favoritism but Akbar favored their loyalty. Akbar was they're loyal, they would do a lot for the empire, so that is why they started increasing in the court.
Akbar also abolished the pilgrimage tax in 1563 and jizya in 1564 because he felt that they were discriminatory. And instructions were sent across the empire for the regional principalities to follow the principle of Sulekul in administration. Now, the Mughals considered themselves emperors of all their subjects, regardless of their religion, and they frequently gave land grants for places of worship, and these were called Madad-e-Maash. Now, even in instances where temples were destroyed during wars or sieges, these were later repaired and rebuilt, as we have seen in the case of Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb. Although during the reign of Aurangzeb, due to financial constraints, the jizya, the tax of jizya, was reimposed.
Yeah, that too after 21 years of his reign. So if he was such an orthodox, he would have immediately, continued with jizya as soon as he sat on the throne, but he didn't do that. Jizya was the tax imposed on non-Muslim subjects, especially in a place where the king is a Muslim.
According to Abul Fazl, the concept of sovereignty was like a social contract wherein the emperor protected the four essences of his subjects in return for complete obedience and a share of whatever they were earning. Now, the four essences that Abul Fazl talks about are life, which was Jaan, property, which was Mal, honor, which was Namus, and faith, which was deen. For Mughal monarchy, the idea of justice was very important, and they gave the concept of justice a lot of importance. And even for visual depictions of the emperor in the court chronicles, the artists have come up with various ways to depict a just society. So one such characterization was that where a lion and a lamb, or in some cases a cow, were depicted together sitting in peace, signifying a time where the strong and the weak could live peacefully with each other. And these images can be seen in niches. For example, there is a court scene that is depicted in Badshah Nama with Shah Jahan and Jahangir, where Jahangir is presenting Shah Jahan with a turban jewel, and the lion and the lamb can be seen under the throne of the emperor. The next topic is capitals and courts. Now, for any empire, the capital city is very important, and the Mughal court is no less. So, the city was very important because it housed the court, and the court, the central city of Mughal India, kept shifting, especially during the 16th and 17th centuries. Now, although initially Babur overtook the throne from Lodi, and for the 4 years that he was the emperor, his court was supposed to be at Agra, although it travelled frequently. In 1560s, Akbar had the fort of Agra constructed in red sandstone, जो कि neighbouring areas से quarry किया गया था. 1570s में he decided that he wanted a separate capital city, which was Fatehpur Sikri, and a reason for this, for him to shift his capital, was because Fatehpur Sikri would be on the road to Ajmer, which was towards the Dargah of Sheikh Muinuddin Chishti. Now, this was important because the Dargah at Ajmer had become a very important pilgrimage center, but additionally, the Mughal court, or the Mughals particularly, had developed a very deep relationship with the Chishti saints. Akbar even commissioned the building of a white marble tomb for the mausoleum of Sheikh Salim Chishti, which was right next to the Friday Mosque at Sikri. Even he even constructed the Buland Darwaza, or the huge arched gateway, which was supposed to be a reminder for his victory in Gujarat. Now, in 1585, he transferred his capital to Lahore due to the tensions at the northwest frontier, and that is where he stayed for nearly 13 years. जैसे कि हमने पिछले chapters में देखा था, the construction of huge monuments and palaces was something that a monarchical figure would do to show off their power and their prestige or their economic power. But in the case of the Mughal rulers and the Muslim rulers in general, it was also an act of piety. Now, Shah Jahan also had accumulated a lot of wealth to indulge in his penchant for creating architectural wonders. In 1648, the emperor, his court and the army again transferred or shifted from Agra to the newly settled capital city of Shahjahanabad, जो कि आज के दौर में पुरानी दिल्ली है. This newly completed imperial capital was a new addition to an old residential complex, and this comprised of the Red Fort, the Jama Masjid, and a 3-lined esplanade, which is actually Chandni Chowk. This newly built capital, or the new additions to this imperial capital, were like a formal vision of what a monarchy should look like. Physically, the court was arranged in a way that mirrored the central importance, or the importance of the sovereign. So the king was supposed to be at the heart of the empire. Therefore, his takht, his throne, was also in the central location of his court. This central location also functioned as a physical representation of the axis mundi, which is a fancy Latin word to suggest that there is a pole that was supporting the earth at the center, and similarly, the emperor was at the center supporting his empire, and therefore his throne was at the center supporting the court. The concept of using a canopy or a chhatri for the emperor was an age-old practice that was practiced in India for at least a millennium before the Mughal court. And during this time, the canopy was supposed to separate the divine radiance of the emperor from that of the sun. So that was the level of divinity that the emperor sought to put out to his subjects. There were a lot of rules and regulations and practices that were supposed to be carried out in the Mughal court, and this is described very well by the chroniclers in the royal histories. Now, the importance of a noble depended on his spatial proximity to the emperor, मतलब कि वो बादशाह से कितने करीब हैं, कितने दूर हैं. That the closer you were to the emperor, the more important you were, the more powers you had. The emperor would award you with the position that you were supposed to be in, and that showed the importance of the noble in the eyes of the emperor. Once the emperor would sit on his throne, एक बार जब बादशाह बैठ जाते हैं तो उसके बाद the nobles were not allowed to even move or leave without permission. Not just this, social control was also defined in the form of address, the courtesies that were used, and even the speech that was supposed to be used in the court for the emperor. हल्की सी भी अगर भूल चूक हो जाती थी in addressing the emperor, तो that would invite punishment.
The forms of salutation to the ruler signified the position in the hierarchy. जितना prostration होगा, जितना वो ज़मीन prostrate करेंगे, उतना ही उनका position higher है court के अंदर. The highest form of salutation was sajda, which was complete prostration. Under Shah Jahan, these rituals were, kind of replaced with two ways of salutation. एक तो होता था ज़मीन बोस, kissing the ground, and चार तस्लीम, झुक के मतलब 4 बार अदाब करना. जो स्टेट बाकी किंगडम से भी जो एनवॉयज आते थे, जो डेलीगेट्स आते थे दूसरे किंग्स के, दे वर व्हेन दे एंटर द कोर्ट, दे वर आल्सो सपोज्ड टू शो सर्टेन अमाउंट ऑफ रिस्पेक्ट टू द रूलर बाय डूइंग ज़मीन बोस और बाय चार तस्लीम और प्रोस्ट्रेटिंग और जस्ट क्लास्पिंग द हैंड ऑन द चेस्ट. बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग किस्सा ये है कि थॉमस रो के एक शख्स थे. ही वॉज एन इंग्लिश एनवॉय ऑफ जेम्स फर्स्ट, and he came to the Mughal court during Jahangir's period, and he just came and he greeted the emperor and he asked for a chair. So that really shocked everybody, because you were not even supposed to move from a position assigned to you according to your according to your rank or the position that you held. But ये जनाब तो कुर्सी में मांग रहे थे. The emperor began his day by doing his personal kind of religious devotion or prayers. Then he went towards a place where there was a Jharoka darshan करते थे. He would show his face to his awam, people from all walks, soldiers थे, craftsmen थे, artisans थे. They would see him, and then he would proceed further towards the day. And Jharoka darshan was started by Akbar. It's actually a Rajput practice in a way to so that there's broader acceptance of the imperial authority. People will connect with the emperor more. तो दिन का आफ्टर झरोका दर्शन दीवाने आम में जो किंग थे वो जाके बैठते थे वहाँ पे. स्टेट ऑफिशियल्स दे वुड गेट देयर पिटिशंस एंड काफ़ी जो चीज़ें हो रही थी सल्तनत के अंदर वो डिस्कस की जाती थी. लॉ डिस्कस किए जाते थे, टैक्सेस डिस्कस किए जाते थे. फिर उसके बाद वो दीवाने आम में जाते थे, दीवाने ख़ास में जाते थे. वहाँ पे personal matters were solved basically. The official high ministers, they would give the emperor with petitions, and tax officials भी आके emperor को पूरी जो imagine एक हफ्ते में जो काम हुआ है या कुछ हुआ है वो भी emperor के सामने present करते थे. और emperor would also look at the architectural projects, and artists जो paintings बना रहे हैं उनको भी वो inspect करते थे उस टाइम पे. On special occasions like Holi, Diwali, Eid, Shab-e-Barat, or जितने festivals होते थे, तो court was full of life. It was decorated beautifully. The court was lit with candles, perfumed candles, and beautiful hangings. And especially जब बाहर से लोग आते थे, delegates आते थे, they used to be in awe. 3 major festivals were celebrated in the Mughal court: lunar and solar birthdays of the rulers, and Nowruz, which is the Iranian New Year. And on birthdays of the monarch, he was weighed against various commodities, gold हो गया, silver हो गया, and that was given in charity. Grand titles were also adopted by the Mughal emperors, especially during the time of coronation, या वो बहुत एक important victory जब वो victory करते थे मतलब against the enemies, then they would adopt these titles, and they were such sounding rhythmic titles, especially spoken by the ushers or the नकीब जो होता था, जो बा मुलायजा होशियार ऐसे जब बोलते थे, तो everybody used to be in awe. एंड जब कॉइन्स में मिंट होते थे उसमें भी जो एम्परर का पूरा नाम विद टाइटल वो इनग्रेव्ड होता था. ग्रांटिंग ऑफ टाइटल्स वाज नॉट ओनली लिमिटेड टू द रूलर्स, ये मेन को भी दिए जाते थे, जो नोबल्स होते थे, ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ मेरिट, एंड दैट ऑल्सो काइंड ऑफ प्लेस देम इन द हायरार्की. टाइटल असफ खान जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल was given to a person was one of the highest title. Asaf was a minister of the Prophet King Sulaiman, so it was given a higher status. Mirza Raja was again a title, Mirza, जो कि दिए गए थे, औरंगजेब ने दिए थे अपने 2 राजपूत nobles को, जसवंत सिंह and जय सिंह को. But titles could be earned and it could be paid for also. Like Mir Khan, for example, he had given 1 lakh rupees to Aurangzeb so that he could add the alphabet alif, which is उर्दू में आप जब पढ़ते हैं अलिफ बे पे होता है, तो अलिफ अल्फ़ाबेट लगाने के लिए, ए लगाने के लिए मीर के आगे, ताकि वो अमीर खान हो जाए, आमिर खान है whatever. तो sometimes they paid for the titles.
In this case he paid for an alphabet.
Yeah. क्योंकि अमीर is also a high ranking title.
Yeah. Very smart.
Other awards included robe of honors, जिसको हम बोलते हैं खिल्लत, that was given to people. फिर एक होता था head to toe वाला सरापा जिसको बोलते थे, जिसमें ट्यूनिक होता था, turban होता था, then you also had the patka. That was also, these were certain gifts that were given to the people जब वो emperor खुश होते थे किसी noble से. फिर एक था lotus blossom set type होता था, that was given to the people, to nobles on the basis of merit, and this was given मतलब कोई बहुत exceptional circumstance होते थे तब ये दिया जाता था. और turban with jewelry, that was also given. Courtier never approached the emperor empty handed, या तो small sum of rupee नज़र देते थे या एक large sum होता था पेशकश. Ambassadors also, they played a very important role in negotiating relations between 2 dynasties. So they would bring पेशकश, they would bring gifts, a sign of respect. एक किस्सा था कि थॉमस रो था जो आया था
कुर्सी मांगने,
जिससे कुर्सी मांगी थी. So he was not very happy because he had given a ring to Asaf Khan and he returned it, Asaf Khan, because वो सिर्फ 400 की थी. He knew the value. Babes, no. The next topic is the imperial household. The term harem comes from the word haram, which means a sacred place. तो मुगल एम्पायर के जो harem थे, that consisted of the emperor's wives, his concubines, his distant relatives, his immediate relatives, daughters, slaves. Then you also had servants, other sort of servants. And polygamy was practiced widely in the subcontinent, especially within the ruling elites. तो मतलब आपकी फूफियाँ भी होती थी, दादियाँ भी होती थी, माएँ भी होती थी, स्टेप मदर्स भी होती थी, फॉस्टर ब्रदर्स भी होते थे, सब फॉस्टर सिस्टर्स होते थे, सब लोग हैरम में होते थे. Both Rajput clans and Mughals, they between both of them, marriage was a way of cementing relationships and cementing ties between each other. Because whenever the king would give his land to another emperor, they would also give his daughter as gift. So इससे क्या होता था, relationship forge होती थी from generations. इसकी वजह से ही मुगल एम्पायर could sustain itself for a longer period by forging such alliances, political alliances with Rajput kings, marriage alliances. उसी की वजह से they could have a deeper hold on the subcontinent. In the Mughal household, distinction was made between begums, who were wives who would belong to the aristocratic family or royal family, and aghas, who were not from so rich families. So there were concubines also, agachas, जो तो lesser aghas, but जो begums होती थी, they played a very important role. They were bestowed with titles. They also, the kings favored them more than the aghas. But things were not so static, these hierarchy in the harem, because at times the agachas and the aghas could rise to the position of begum if there are not 4 begums. Love and motherhood also played a very important role. By chance, if an agha gave birth to a male child, she could be, she could rise to a good position. She can become a begum also. And these aghas and agachas, they were given monthly allowances in cash, and also they were bestowed with gifts on the basis of their status. Apart from wives, numerous male and female servants were also there, and who performed various tasks from mundane to high, really skilled tasks. Eunuchs were also there. They were known as Khwaja Sara, and they performed a very important role. They were the ones who kind of moved between internal and external lives of the harem, and they would be guarding the ladies, they would be guards, they would be servants, at times agents for women who were dabbling in commerce. After Noor Jahan's death, Mughal queens and princesses played a very important role, क्योंकि शाहजहां किंग बन गए थे और उनकी 2 बेटियां थी, जहानारा, रोशनारा. They played a very important role. They were getting allowances and also income as high as a very high-ranking mansabdar. In fact, Jahanara, she also additionally, she got revenues out of the port of Surat. That was a very important center of commerce at that time. They also owned ships. Zahir se baat hai, when these princesses had control over the resources, they also indulged in construction activities, building activities, building various monuments, mosques, gardens. For example, जब शाहजहानाबाद बना था, तो जो चांदनी चौक है, उसको डिज़ाइन जहानारा ने किया था. इनफैक्ट एक कारवां सराय भी थी उधर, it was double story with a beautiful garden which was like a mini hotel at that point of time. वो भी जहानारा ने ही डिज़ाइन किया था. An interesting glimpse of especially of the domestic world was also given by Gulbadan Banu Begum when she wrote Humayun Nama. Gulbadan was the daughter of Babur, and she was the sister of Humayun, and she wrote fluently in Persian and Turkish. जब अकबरनामा भी लिखी जा रही थी, then Akbar had asked his aunt to give details about Humayun and Babur so that he could Abul Fazl could include in the book. Mostly जो हुमायूं नामा है उसमें आप हुमायूं के बारे में जानते हैं, एंड ऑल्सो टेंशन बिटवीन द प्रिंसेस एंड द किंग, एंड हाउ एंड द रोल प्लेड बाय द ओल्डर वुमेन इन मीडिएटिंग देम. इनफैक्ट जो बाबर की बहन थी खानजाद बेगम, शी ऑल्सो प्लेड वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल इन द कोर्ट. Then you had अपनी गुलबदन बानो बेगम तो है ही. Even अकबर की जो मदर थी हमीदा बानो बेगम, she also played a very important role. She was also made the governor of Delhi when Akbar was not here, and he was tackling the northwest frontier. Then you have the Rajput wife of Akbar. She also played a very important role. Noor Jahan थी, जहानारा थी, रोशनारा थी. Mughal women played very, very important role. They were just not behind the veil. But they were up there and indulging in commerce, indulging in construction activities, also played a very important role in politics.
The next topic is the imperial offshoots. Now, when you look at the court chronicles, the idea that you get from these is that to run the Mughal empire, to run the Mughal state, the emperor would just dictate his wishes, and your wish is my command. His command would be taken into effect immediately. But if you look closely into the chronicles, you get an idea about the workings of the administration, how there were different departments that were working under the emperor in the various provinces that allowed for the emperor's vision to be carried out effectively. And this was done largely through a core of officials in the Mughal court, which were the Amirs. Amirs is actually not the correct word. The singular usage is Amir. In plural, it is Umara. And these were the nobles. Jo nobility thi, they came from a variety of backgrounds. Effectively, this meant that one faction could not rise to such a power that it could overthrow the emperor. The nobles or the officer corps have been described as a bouquet of flowers, as a guldasta that is held together by the loyalty towards the emperor.
गुलदस्ता में हर एक टाइप के फूल होते हैं, है ना? वैसे ही
मुगल कोर्ट में हर एक तरह का noble था. Now, of these plural nobles that were there in the Mughal court, the Iranis and Turanis were the two factions that were there since the beginning, since Babur's time. Many of them had accompanied Babur when he came to India. Others migrated later and they joined the Mughal court. The two other ruling groups of the Mughal court, who were also very powerful, were added on into the Mughal court from the 1560s. 1560 onwards. These were the Rajputs and the Indian Muslims, who were also called the Sheikzadas. The first Rajput to join the Mughal court was Raja Bharmal Kachwaha from
Amir.
Yes. He was the one whose daughter was married to Akbar, and but it wasn't just through marriage alliances that you could become a part of the Mughal court. Even through, even if you were educated or you were wanting to rise to a higher position, you were also awarded that based on merit. One such example is Raja Todarmal, who was the finance officer of Akbar, and he was from the Khatri class.
He was also the financial officer of Sher Suri.
Yeah.
So that's from, and because he was really good, that is why Akbar got into his court.
Jahangir ke under, Iranians also rose to very prominent positions because his wife Noor Jahan was of Iranian descent. During Aurangzeb's time also, you see a lot of Rajputs and even Marathas occupying primary position in the Mughal court. Mansab में दो numerical distinction होते थे. पहला था Zat, which was your position in the court as well as your salary, and the second was Savar, which was the number of horsemen that you were supposed to maintain from Ghodsavar. 17th century tak a mansabdar that had the rank of 1,000 Zat was considered a noble or an Amir. अब ये जो mansabdars थे, these nobles participated in military activity, but they also served as nobles in the Mughal court. It was the mansabdar's responsibility to recruit, equip and train and maintain the most important part of the Mughal army, which was the cavalry. Each military commander was supposed to maintain his horsemen. जो horses भी थे, they were supposed to be branded by the imperial mark, which was the Dag. The emperor personally chose the ranks of the nobles and any promotions or demotions that were to be carried out, except for very low ranks in which he did not participate. The idea of the Mansab system, which was the brainchild of Akbar, he also created spiritual links with select Mansabdars who he called his murids. For the members of nobility, maintaining an imperial army was a thing of power, and to become a Mansabdar, one had to petition a noble who would then present a tajwiz or another petition to the emperor. And when this petition was accepted by the emperor and he felt the receiver befitting, he would award him with a mansab. In the Mughal court, there was a very prominent position, that of the Mir Bakshi or the Paymaster General, who stood in open court towards the right hand side of the emperor, and he would introduce the candidates who were meant to be promoted or awarded mansabdars, and it was his office that prepared documents that would allow for candidates to be selected along with his seal and his personal signature along with that of the emperor. There were two more important officials, which were the Diwane-Ala or the finance minister, as well as the Sadr-us-Sudur, who would be responsible for granting land grants or Madad-e-Maash, as well as appointing local judges or qazis.
Madad-e-Maash were basically religious land grants.
These three important nobles would sometimes come together and form an advisory body to for the benefit of the emperor, but they were independent of each other. And it was with the help of these three officials that Akbar shaped the administrative, fiscal and monetary institutions of the empire. Additionally, nobles stationed at the court or Tainat-e-Rakab were like a reserve force meant for military expeditions or to be sent to a province, and they were supposed to meet with the emperor twice to show submission to the emperor, and they were responsible for protecting the emperor and the house and his household.
And the nobles who were like the Mansabdars who were posted out, they were known as Tanate-Supajat. Another very important aspect is that all nobles were Mansabdars, but all Mansabdars were not nobles.
Moving on. The Mir Bakshi was also responsible for the recording of the court proceedings in a way, and recording of what was happening in the court was also a main concern of the chroniclers and also of the court. So all applications and documents and royal orders, which were the Farman, were recorded judiciously by a corps of nobles or writers from the court who were called the Wakia Nabis. Additionally, there were agents of the court or who worked for the nobles or the regional provincial heads, and they were called the Wakils, and they noted down the court proceedings judiciously along with the date and time of the court session, which was called the Peher, and this document was given the heading Akhbarat-e-Darbar-e-Mualla, which basically meant news from the exalted court. और इस अखबारात में basically क्या था, who was present in the court, who was absent, what were the titles that were given, the grants that were given, who received any present, if any present was given out, what is the status of any diplomatic mission that has been received or that has gone out. If a noble is not present, the emperor is asking about them, how they are, about their well-being. And this is an important this gives us important information about the personal dealings of the emperor with the court as well as of the nobles. And this information or the news was not just meant for the court or for the capital, it was spread throughout the empire, even to distant provinces, and this was done with the help of round the clock foot soldiers in a way, or mailmen that would relay the information from one place to another. They were called the Qasids or the Patmars, and they would carry the scrolls in bamboo shoots, and the information would be relayed from the center to the province very quickly, and it's an example of how fast the communication was in the entire empire. The emperor also received information from distant capitals the same way, and Jitna through the farthest province, you could receive the news in just a few days' time.
Because imagine उस time पे Delhi to Multan or Lahore, it used to take 40 days वैसे.
Yeah.
But these people would, get the information really fast.
Yeah, so there was a very effective relay system that was in place. The foot mailman would travel generally alone or maybe in a very small group, and they would relay the information that would be taken down and replied to almost instantly. अब जैसे the center had the central administration had different departments, even the provinces had something similar, and it replicated that of the center. The provinces, which were called the Subas, they also had their own Bakshi or Diwan or Sadr, and the head of the province, which is the governor, was called the Subedar, and he reported directly to the emperor. The Suba was further divided into sarkars, which was overlooked by commandants or the faujdars, and these regions often overlapped. The faujdars were responsible for keeping the contingent of the cavalry or the foot soldiers intact, and the local administration was looked after at the level of the pargana, which was like a sub-district, and the people there were three key players that were responsible for the pargana, and these positions were often hereditary. These were that of the kanungo, who looked after the records of the revenue collection, the chaudhry, who was responsible for collecting the revenue, and the qazi, who was of course who was appointed by the nobles at the court of the emperor, but also helped out in petty disputes at the level. Now, each department of the administration maintained their own army of support staff, and these included the clerks, the accountants, auditors, people who would take down who would copy down the orders, and along with the other functionaries, and they created a lot of written documents because everything was judiciously noted down, and they were supposed to be able in their work. They followed the rules and regulations that were prescribed by the emperor judiciously. Although Persian was the language of the court, in the village level sometimes regional languages were also adopted. अब जो Mughal chronicles हैं, they depict the idea of the Mughal Empire as the emperor controlling everything in the empire down to the village level. But we have seen in previous chapters how the local magnates, who were called the zamindars, they also wielded considerable power. So it is not possible that the emperor had exact knowledge of what was going on in the village. At the same time, there were conflicts that would rise between the emperor and the zamindars over authority, because the zamindar had their own land and they had people that were supporting them, and that created a conflict. And there was also conflict on the share of the resources that the zamindar was supposed to give to the emperor. This often led to the local zamindars mobilizing the peasant against the state.
The next topic is beyond the frontiers. तो whenever even chronicles जो लिखे गए हैं kings के बारे में, whenever and they all of these emperors had really high sounding titles like शहंशाह, तो शहंशाह मतलब kings of kings, और many of them when they sat on the throne, when they got their throne, then also they acquired many adopted many titles. जैसे जहांगीर है, जहांगीर भी it's a title, it's not his name was सलीम. जहांगीर का मतलब है द वर्ल्ड सीजर. फिर शाहजहाँ, तो शाहजहाँ का असली नाम खुर्रम था. वॉजेंट शाहजहाँ, ये नहीं कि वो शाहजहाँ बोलेगा अपने जैसे कोई भाई है शाहजहाँ, नहीं, इट्स दैट्स नॉट द केस. मतलब शाहजहाँ मीन्स द वर्ल्ड कॉन्करर, किंग ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. तो दे एंड दीज टाइटल्स जो ये अक्वायर करते थे उस टाइम पे, और जो ये क्रॉनिकल्स थे, दे वुड ऑलवेज मेंशन अबाउट दीज टाइटल्स टू काइंड ऑफ लेजिटिमाइज देयर रूल ऑल्सो, एंड ऑल्सो की टू शो कि दे हैड द राइट टू रूल द एम्पायर, द बॉर्डर्स, एंड कि उनका है रूल. एंड दीज कंटेम्प्रेरी histories, they also tell us about the relationship of the Mughals with the neighboring empires, how whether they were diplomatic, whether there was tension between them. जैसे जो Mughals थे, they had उनके जो neighbors थे वो सफ़विद थे. सफ़विद rulers जो शाहs थे वो ईरान के थे. Then they were also the contemporaries of the Ottoman Empire. तो उनके बीच में क्या diplomatic relations होती थी. The political and diplomatic relations between Mughals and that of Iran, that of Iran and Turan, it all hinged on the control of the Hindu Kush mountains that separated Afghanistan region from the rest of Central Asia and Iran. So whenever the conquerors they entered the Indian subcontinent, they all had to pass through the Hindu Kush mountains. A constant aim of the Mughal policy was to ward off this danger and to protect the strategic position जो काबुल, especially काबुल और कंधार है. काबुल एंड जो कंधार मतलब काबुल जो कंधार है वो बोन ऑफ कंटेंशन रहा है between the Mughals and Iran and the Safavid rulers of Iran. This fortress town had initially been in possession of Humayun and it was reconquered by Akbar in 1595. But though Safavid rulers and Mughals they had good relationship, but जो सफ़ेद रूलर्स थे ना दे कंटिन्यू टू स्टेक क्लेम्स ऑन कंधार कि नहीं ये हमारा है इवन आफ्टर इट वाज रिकॉन्कर्ड बाय अकबर. 1613 में जहांगीर ने एक एनवॉय भेजा था टू द कोर्ट ऑफ द सफ़ेद रूलर्स to plead them, to tell them that Kandhar is a part of the Mughal Empire, but it all failed. And 1622 में Persians they sieged Kandhar, and the kind of the Mughal military was not so well prepared at that time, and they lost the war, and they had to give the fortress and the city of Kandhar. जो relationship Ottomans और Mughals का था वो basically based था कि free movement हो सके Indian traders और merchants की और लोगों की towards the areas that came under the Ottomans, especially Hijaz. जो जगह थी that was under the Ottoman Arabia, and वो जगह थी जहाँ मक्का और मदीना भी थे. The Mughal emperor they combined religion and commerce by exporting valuable merchandise to Aden and Mocha. They both were the important Red Sea ports. So India से pilgrims जाते थे, and commerce, a lot of products they were sent to this particular place और जो ये Red Sea port था. और साथ ही साथ में जितना भी पैसा होता था सेल से that was redistributed as charity to the people who were looking after the shrines over there and religious communities. But औरंगज़ेब के टाइम पे ये पता चला था कि there was misappropriation of these funds that was taking place there. So he preferred that money should be redistributed in the Indian subcontinent, because ये जगह भी उनके औरंगज़ेब के हिसाब से ये जगह भी मक्का से कम नहीं थी. यूरोप ने मुगल्स की जो इन्फॉर्मेशन है वो रिसीव की थी थ्रू द जेस्यूट प्रीस्ट. दे वर देयर इन गोवा एंड दे वर इनवाइटेड टू द मुगल कोर्ट ऑफ अकबर एंड फॉर रिलीजियस डिस्कशंस, एंड दे वर द अर्लीस्ट इम्प्रेशंस ऑफ द मुगल कोर्ट दैट वाज स्प्रेड अक्रॉस यूरोप. एक तो 15th सेंचुरी में डायरेक्ट सी रूट इस्टेब्लिश हो गया था पोर्चुगल से इंडिया की तरफ, स्पेशली गोवा की तरफ, एंड जो किंग थे पोर्चुगल के किंग थे he was very interested in spreading of Christianity in India, and that is why he had sent his people, his missionaries, the Society of Jesus जिनको Jesuits बोलते थे. 1580 was the first time when Akbar had sent invitation. He had invited the missionaries to his court, and he discussed with them about Christianity and had several debates in his court with the ulema. The other two missionaries were sent in 1591 and 95 in Lahore. These Jesuits account is basically based on their personal observation of Akbar, because they were really given a position close to him in the court. They accompanied him on various expeditions, hunting and hunting expeditions, and also leisure activities. And the Jesuits they also tutored his children. So जो उनके accounts थे वो personal details थी कि what they thought of Akbar, and काफ़ी उनकी information they also drew from the chronicles, Persian chronicles, and उनकी information भी were added in the chronicles. So they were the first ones to give Europe, to tell Europe about the Mughal Empire. Questioning formal religion. Akbar showed really high, he respected the Jesuits, and that had, impacted them, and they were really impressed. And somewhere they thought that Akbar was really interested in Christianity and he wanted to convert. But that is not true. The Jesuit, especially the Montserrat the, he wrote about Akbar, and in a way because he was so used to the prevailing intolerance in Western Europe, so he did not like that Akbar was really liberal. So in a way he said that Akbar allowed everybody to follow the religion. In a way he was violating the basic principles, And Akbar was a person who held discussions in the Ibadat Khana, and everyone initially, ulemas were there to discuss about religion with him, but he got so disgusted by the ulemas, he opened the doors to all religion. The doors were open to all religion. Hindus आते थे, Zoroastrians आते थे, Buddhists आते थे, Jains आते थे, and they should discuss about religion. And Akbar always believed कि अक्ल से काम लेना चाहिए और नकल का काम नहीं करना चाहिए. तो वो सबकी बातें सुनते थे, वो सारी डिस्कशंस होती थी, एंड ही बिलीव दैट सब रिलीजन बात तो एक ही करते हैं, और दो रिलीजन बहुत सारे हैं पर भगवान एक ही हैं. He believed in his own thoughts जब religion के ऊपर होते हैं. He believed in the light and the sun. That is why Sulakul के का जन्म हुआ था. Sulakul means peace upon everybody. You know, everybody is equal in the eyes of the state, in the eyes of Akbar, irrespective of people's religion. And भाईचारा होना चाहिए, that is more important. And इनका जो ये thought process था वो अबुल फजल ने भी काफ़ी propagate किया था, काफ़ी उस चीज़ को फैलाया था. With this chapter we are actually finished with your second book. We'll soon start with your third book, which is the last book. And I hope that you have liked today's episode. Please do read it yourself, because by chance we've missed out on something. It's very necessary that you also read these chapters. Like, share and subscribe, and keep watching Tariq.